Well, hello, everybody. This is Sheila Harris with the podcast Starts and Stops. I'm so glad you joined again. If you're watching on my YouTube channel or if you're listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, I'm so glad that you're here. Um, so today we have a very special topic and we have a guest. So I'm so excited whenever we have guests. Um, so I wanted to use a different type of topic today, even though this is starts and stops. This topic is definitely something that I feel that we all can relate to in terms of, making sure that, we continue to go on after a stop that happens in our life. One of those stops, unfortunately, is grief. And when you're dealing with grief, there's so many different layers to it. And as I bring this person on, you'll see why I wanted to delve on the topic. And then we'll talk about the different facets of grief and why I wanted this to be shared with our audience. So without further ado, I'm going to read her bio first. Her name is Ke'Shawn Hill-Adamson, and she's an accomplished certified grief educator, coach, grief movement guide, writer, author, blogger, and public speaker. She is certified by the International Coaching Federation and the Institute of Professional Grief Coaching as a certified grief coach. Ke'Shawn has been mentored and certified by world renowned grief expert David Kessler, becoming a certified grief educator and trained co moderator for specific losses in his Tender Hearts Group grief support program. Additionally, she is a certified grief movement guide under Paul Denniston, helping individuals process grief that is stuck in their bodies through movement, breath, and sound. Ke'Shawn has also trained under Rachel Hanfling, an Emmy nominated former executive producer of The Oprah Winfrey Show and Anderson Cooper Show, in the Own the Power of Your Story masterclass in public speaking for grief educators. Throughout her career, which has included roles in advertising, academia, and program management, Ke'Shawn's personal journey with processing her grief and overcoming health challenges, including morbid obesity and lupus, has transformed her life. As founder and CEO of UnStuck Worldwide, Ke'Shawn empowers and guides individuals to move from grief, loss, and pain to find meaning, joy, and purpose. She has authored several books and contributed to several books, including Dads Deserve It Too, Honoring the Love of Fathers, What Makes You Smile, Joy, Happiness, Gratitude, and a peer-reviewed piece in Growing Through Grief, all available on Amazon. Ke'Shawn also founded Boom, which stands for Break, Obliterate, and Overcome Mountains, a faith-based blog inspiring resilience and purpose. Married for 15 years with two beautiful daughters, Ke'Shawn cherishes her roles as a wife, mompreneur, daughter, sister, and best friend. Her faith is her cornerstone, providing strength, guidance, purpose, and resilience through life's toughest challenges. And if you want more on her, you can visit unstuckworldwide.com. Welcome, Ke'Shawn Hill-Adamson. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm so excited that you're here. So for the audience, for those who don't know, Ke'Shawn, you and we met some years ago, but then we were reconnected recently. I had the pleasure of speaking at a women's ministry seminar at Abundant Love Apostolic Church in New Rochelle. And I do want to take a moment to send love to the Abundant Love family on the loss of Mother Sarah Brown, who was influential in so many women's lives. Definitely, I know in Ke'Shawn, in your life, definitely in mine over the years. But I was blessed to be able to be at that seminar and speak in November. So during that time, I was asked to speak about my book, Calling Revealed. And the topic was God Can Use It All. I just kind of talked through one of the chapters of the book. And one of those chapters deals with the story of Joseph. And for those who listen in, and if you've ever listened to any of my podcasts, I have warned y'all, I am churchy. So I definitely refer to the Bible. But in this instance, and that's a good thing, but in this instance, in my book, I was talking about the story of Joseph and some of the trials and things that he went through. And one of the issues that he went through was the fact that, he really had issues with his family, had to deal with the ire and hatred from his brothers, just so many different trials and tribulations. And then, but my topic was God can still use it all. And we talked about, as the ladies were gathering, we talked about forgiveness. We talked about what that meant for him and the fact that even after all of that, there was still a bigger purpose that God had, and he was able to help his family in the end, but he had to forgive all those people in terms of, some of the things that they went through. Now, the reason why I brought Ke'Shawn on today is because during the Q&A portion of the seminar, Ke'Shawn raised her hand and talked about the fact that sometimes, even though we go through things like Joseph, some of us still have unlocked trauma. Again, unlocked trauma. And then she mentioned that she was a grief coach. And I was like really intrigued. And I was like, what is that? And I wanted to, kind of delve a little bit more into that. And that's when I knew. I was like, I have to have her on the podcast just to kind of talk a little bit more about that, just to kind of help others. So again, thank you, Ke'Shawn, for joining today for this. So it's such an important topic. So I'm going to throw it to you. What is a grief coach, and what brought you on this journey to become one?
I became a grief coach. Well, let me start here. The reason why I started this journey is because I myself am a courageous griever. Um, Grief started for me at the age of 7 when I lost my grandmother, who was like a second mother to me. And when she passed away, she was the matriarch of the family. She was everyone's best friend. That was my best friend, everyone's best friend. And when she passed away, it threw my family all for a loop. It was beyond devastating and traumatic at that young age. And then thereafter, there were not just the loss of her, but then there was a tremendous amount of secondary losses that I had to get accustomed to. Loss of family, just loss of routine, just everything that you can think that can be disruptive for a kid, it was. So it took my family, decades to kind of just rebuild after that.
Hmm.
But then thereafter, I had cumulative losses. Everyone who was a pillar in my life, one by one, they began to pass away.
Hmm.
So I had a lifetime of grief and I didn't even know what to do with it. Um, and then, it traveled through my childhood, adolescence. And although outwardly I became very successful, my family, we're strong individuals. Most people that's like, time will heal it. You kind of do what you have to do, you get through the moment, and then you forge forward. And that's what I did. And I was end up being really successful in my career and my education. But grief started to affect my health. It started to manifest in my body. And so, I began to put on weight, unexplained weight, wasn't anything I was doing, eating. And I began the journey, and I had gotten up to at least 325 pounds when after I gave birth to my daughter. That's when I knew, okay, I need to figure this out. What's going on the inside that's manifesting on the outside? And so when I started that journey, I started my blog, and when I started blogging, what I unearthed through my writing was a lifetime of grief. And I didn't even know I was grieving because on the outside, I did what I was supposed to do. My family was well, but on the inside, I was dying and I didn't know I was dying. And the weight and the sickness and all those things indicated to me there was something wrong. So from that point forward, I got into therapy to really, delve into what it was. And again, it was the grief and I began to feel hungry and thirsty to be able to understand grief. And I started studying, and one thing led to another. So, what I discovered in my research, there was a grief coach program. And so I'm like, grief coach. I didn't know there was such a thing called grief work. Again, there's a lot of myths about grief. Time will heal it, it'll get better. um like there's nothing we can do about it. And what I discovered is there are things we can do about it, and we have to work through it. So a grief coach is someone who really holds your hand and helps you to understand grief, navigate grief, helps you to navigate the rocky terrain of it, the
Hmm.
unpredictability of it. and help you to move forward, to help you move forward in it, to be able to find purpose in the pain, to take small attainable steps to moving through it, not avoiding it, but how to move through it. So they kind of hold your hand in that process.
Ooh, this is a lot to unpack, right? There were so many real nuggets of truth that you just said. The fact that you didn't even know, you didn't realize you were holding the grief, the compacted losses, which a lot of us have gone through. I definitely remember that in my own life where we had in our family a lot of death, and it was just really impactful. But then, again, making sure you address it. I love how you said that, when you found the grief coaching program, you didn't even know it was a thing, but something drew you to it. I love the fact though that it's called grief coaching, because usually you think about therapy, and we'll get to that, the difference between a therapist and a grief coach in a minute. But I love how there's the aspect of coaching, because coaching has really evolved in our society, especially in the Western society for the past, I don't, a few decades, I'll say. Talk about how a grief coach, how the coaching aspect can be a benefit to somebody who has gone through a devastating loss, like that whole aspect of being a coach. Like, what's the difference?
So a coach is someone, so the difference between a coach and a therapist is a therapist, they're able to diagnose, they're
Mhm.
able to they delve deep into the past, psychological issues. Some are able, psychologists are able to prescribe medication. Coaching is a lot different because it's more of a friend and helps you to navigate the grief on a one-on-one, and it depends on how what you need. So they position themselves to be what you need. So sometimes grief coaches, they do grief groups, sometimes they do one-on-one, sometimes they give, they pack in a lot of resiliency tools. It's more than just, we have to learn to dance in the moment. And
Mm,
that's the part about grief, because grief is so unpredictable. You can feel multiple things at any time. And so to be there as a listening ear, to be witnessed, to be able to learn how to unpack your feelings, to be able to help you set small, attainable goals to find meaning in the pain, to be able to get rid of the burden of guilt. Just taking you through a process, and being able, like a coach would do, being able to motivate, being able to encourage, being a strong support system to help you move forward. So
mhm.
our goal is, it's about moving forward. It doesn't happen overnight. The grief journey is not a linear journey. It's just not something, you just one and done. It's something that is a part of you for the rest of your life. So
Mhm.
giving you the tools that you need to help you guide you through it, and be able to give you the resiliency tools to recover. That's the big thing. How do I
Right.
recover from these losses?
Right. So the resiliency piece really stuck out to me because I noticed somebody on social media the other day who talked about, even dealing with therapy and counseling. We're going to have these feelings, but at some point there is a transition in terms of, needing this therapist, and needing, and being in this place, whatever that place is on your mental health journey. But I love what you say about resiliency, because we know, and like I say, as women of faith, we know that trials are going to come, loss is going to come, different transitions are going to come. So now we have to think about, how do we deal with it, and how do we remain resilient through that grief and through that process? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because sometimes um, we may not feel we're resilient, or we don't even know how to get there. We're just caught in that, in those tears, and we're caught in the feelings and the trauma and everything else. Can we get to resiliency?
It's one moment at a time.
Okay.
It's one, literally, it's one moment at a time. Sometimes for some people, it's just getting out of the bed.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
that needs to be celebrated.
Hmm.
Sometimes for some people, it's just going out or making a phone call, speaking to a friend.
Hmm.
Um, Resiliency looks different for everybody.
Hmm.
And again, therapy is great in its place. I did therapy, so
Right.
I understood the importance of it. Therapists, they are trained to give you emotional and psychological tools, and help you navigate the emotional terrain of what you're feeling and thinking and dissect all of that. Coaching, on the other hand, is like, it could be like your greatest friend. It's a companion.
Okay.
It's a companion. Because a lot of times when we're going through grief, we feel really alone. So when you
Right.
have someone to lock arms with you who's willing to listen, therapy is more on a scheduled basis. You may go once a week. You may sometimes, if you're in, and depending on the need, if you have complicated grief,
Right.
coaching would not be for you. You would need a therapist for that, because they're able to dig a lot deeper psychologically. But for coaching, for everyone who is just needs the support system, that would be appropriate avenue coaching. There's grief coaching, and you're able to get tools and get the support system, but also to be in grief group support, you need to be able to listen to others and be able to um, receive, listen, and be totally present. So there are different ways we can get resiliency tools. It depends on where you are. But definitely, with grief coaching, it's packed with tools depending on how
Right.
the grief coach is set up. I know for me, my mission is to help the brokenhearted to heal and recover.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lifelong journey. So resiliency looks different for different people, but it is something that, through work, and that's what they call grief work.
Yes.
That's a thing. I didn't know it was a thing that you actually have to work through. And that's not just with grief, that's with trauma, that's with
Yes.
any type of loss, any type of heartbreak. You need to process it. And a lot of times we're just too busy. For a lot of professional people, or just moms, dads, just whatever you find yourself doing in life that keeps you busy, we don't have time.
Right.
And so we don't know, and a lot of times we just kind of shrug it off, which is the story of my life. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, no, 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 no. You can't shrug off anymore. I have showed up now. Your body
Right.
will tell it's on itself. Like, no, you're burying some stuff. You need to deal. And it'll come up. Your body has its own natural wisdoms. It'll tell you what you need exactly when you need it. And it doesn't care what you're doing.
Can you give an example of when your body will tell you? Like, is it physical? Is it in me snapping at somebody? Is it like what will it look like? Or is it all of those things?
All those things.
Okay.
It could be all of those things.
Right.
A lot of times they say, where do I start with my healing? Where are your triggers?
Mm,
Where are your
yes.
like what and what gets you hyper emotionally agitated? What are those things that happen that just you know poke
Push
at
those buttons.
that push
Right.
those buttons? That's how
Right.
you can really figure out, like,
Yeah. No, no, I love that. I love that. I know that, and thank you for giving a definition of grief. I think most people think of grief when you think of the loss of a loved one, or let's say catastrophic loss after something like COVID or 9/11. Obviously there's loss and there's grief. Well, I've begun to see, there's also grief in transitions. When I'm on LinkedIn, all along the timeline or on any part of social media, especially like LinkedIn, people are talking about losing their job after being there for 10, 15, 20 years. Or it might be somebody who is, they're in their midlife and they are going to make that transition from being at a place for X amount of years or being in a particular career for X amount of years, 20, 30 years. They still see this life ahead, but they don't know what to do with themselves because that particular job or assignment is now over. And that can be in the case of corporate, that can be in nonprofit, that can be in ministry. Like, what do you do next? Question to
then
you is, for transitions of any kind and grief from a transition of any kind, how do you correctly and effectively deal with it? Like, especially when it's not the traditional, what we consider grief, but it's a transition like I described or other things. How do you really deal with it?
to be intentional about honoring your feelings.
Mhm.
There is some intentionality that's required from us when we are transitioning, experiencing loss, because a lot of times, again, we'll just keep forging through, you know,
Just
yeah,
functional and yeah.
just kind of like it is, like it is what it is, shrugging it off and not really dealing with it.
Hmm.
So, in transitions and everything that we do, we really have to honor our feelings. We really have to really be intentional about sitting down and like, you know what? I really feel bad that I don't have that job anymore.
Right.
Like, like there's some separation anxiety that I'm feeling. To really sit down long enough in silence and just really just check in.
Yeah.
That's what we really need to do. That's what I didn't know what to do, but I've learned how to do it. Like sometimes we can walk around like someone can offend you and
Hmm.
you're just going out the day. It really hurts your feelings.
Right.
But you just like, okay, and you shrug it off and you keep going, but then something else happens, and then something else happens, and something else. So how many losses are we experiencing a day? The Grief Recovery Institute said there's over like 43
Wow.
losses, but that's not exhaustive. So there's just so many different things that we deal with, and we just keep it pushing. So,
Right.
my thing is the intentional, just being intentional about sitting sometimes and just checking in. How are you doing today? How are you feeling? What are you
Right.
feeling? Like the
Yeah.
children's emotions chart.
Yes.
I
I've heard of that.
feel,
Yes.
yeah, like I do that with my daughter all the time. Yeah,
Right.
I feel, and she's like sad, mad, angry. Like
Right.
we really have to check in, like, and because, and
Yes.
then what do you need?
Making her communicate it.
Yeah, like what do you need? What is
Hmm.
going to help you through this moment, and what can we do about it? Because
I
there's things
love
we
that.
can do, and there's things we can't do. So what do we
Right.
do with the pain that we feel?
Thank you for saying that. I think sometimes in different communities, and just in society, you can be hit with so many different things. So there is that let's keep on pushing mentality where it's like it is what it is. I've got to keep grinding, I've got to keep hustling, I've got to keep doing what I'm doing. But I can see how over the years and then the decades and over time, all of that is built up in you. And I think I heard Dr. Anita Phillips say, at some point it's going to come out, and like you said, it's going to show in different ways. And I love what you said about sometimes, just sitting down and feeling. As a child, I used to love to write. I still love to write to this day before it went into my career. But I would, write stories, and then I had teachers who would teach us how to journal. Talk, if you will, can you talk a little bit about journaling? Because I know during COVID I was part of an online virtual seminar, and during some of the teachings she would have us journal. So we're all on Zoom, people from all around the world, and you just kind of write out your feelings. And sometimes I'll lose that because it's just like, oh, I'm just going, I have so many things to do, I'm so busy. But in recently I found the joy of journaling and really writing out, hey, this doesn't feel great, or I'm confused by this, or whatever it is. Can you talk about just sitting and being quiet and sitting with your feelings and not being afraid to sit with your feelings? Because I think there's a fear to it as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
People don't
yeah.
want to feel.
Right.
They
Why
don't.
is that?
It's painful.
Hmm.
It just is. It's just painful.
Hmm.
And honestly, sometimes if a lot of people think if I actually feel that, I'll never stop feeling it. I'll never stop crying. I
Right.
will unleash the beast.
Right.
And if I
Yeah.
unleash that beast,
It's a problem.
I'm not going to be okay. But like the rain, it doesn't rain forever. It eventually stops.
That's right.
Your body physically, if you're crying, your body physically can't just keep crying.
Hmm.
You eventually stop crying,
Hmm.
and your body is telling you you need to cry.
Hmm.
So yeah, people don't, and myself included, all of us.
Right. All of us.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, as a grief coach, if someone comes to you and says, I'm dealing with this issue, and I know there's a difference between a therapist and a grief coach, but what kind of advice would you give to that person who maybe they have transitioned from their career after 30 years and they're feeling a little lost, or maybe they were in a relationship and it fizzled out, and now their dreams of being in a healthy and committed relationship, they're not sure if they're on the right footing. Like, how would you guide them in that process as a grief coach?
Feel your feelings. That's the number one.
Okay.
Witness their pain. A lot of
Okay.
times people they just want to be seen. And a lot of times we're not seen. You know, how many times can you talk to someone, a friend, a family member, about that breakup? In what way? It's not that you can't. You can speak to a family member and they'll be willing to listen, but how many times can you say it and say it and say it and say it? In therapy and in grief coaching, you get to say it and say it and say it and say it. You get to have your pain witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is to honor your feelings, to be able to really sit and just process what it is that you're going through, to be, again, come up with, what do I do now? But there are stages to that, and
Right.
sometimes you're not quite ready to like move on. You need to just sit with the moment, and grieve what just happened. A lot of times we don't grieve. We'll move on to the next thing, and think that we've closed the chapter. I remember I moved, and it was at my childhood home, and
Mm-hmm.
we moved into a bigger place in my apartment complex. But you know I was so excited to move that we packed up our stuff and just left. But then when I got into this place, I was just super sad. I was
Right.
super sad, and
Right.
I felt like I wasn't settled. So I asked the super of the building, and I said, can I go back to the apartment?
Nice.
And I just went and I spent the entire day in the apartment, because it was a place that was the only place I had ever known. I
Right.
sat and I journaled and I cried, and I had to make peace with what wasn't going to be anymore, because I was
Right.
leaving the place where all of my memories were,
Right.
and I was never going to be able to go back there again.
Right.
And I had to have closure to that. So a lot of times being able to have closure, the
Yes.
thing. And so we can't really just like full speed ahead and just move on to things. You need to really sit and just process and delve into your feelings and try to find closure. And that doesn't happen overnight.
That's
So
right.
to be able to, that's where I would start. Let's start here.
Recently that sometimes, at least in school, like that when you go from I'm probably dating myself, but when you go from, to first grade to, to sixth grade, you're going to graduate to junior high school. Then from junior high school to, so from seventh to ninth, that's what we did. You're going to graduate to high school. Then from 10th to 12th, I graduate to college. And then I remember for my college graduation, I always say my alma mater, Fordham University, the Lincoln Center campus, was the place I needed to be. And those 4 years, when it came to the culmination of it, I was feeling a little sad inside. And I don't even think I told my friends because I had such a great time there. And I was, at that moment, I was like, wow, this is it. And I knew that I had to go ahead and move into the working world. And I'm thankful for that. But at least with a graduation ceremony, you put on your cap and gown, you hear the music, you hug your friends, and you move on. But life isn't like that all the time.
Mhm.
If someone dies, or if you break up with your boyfriend, or if you are, there's a transition in a relationship, or if you do have to move to another job, or your team got laid off and you're the only one there, or vice versa, there's not a ceremony. And if you almost feel like there's not a chance to say goodbye, and if you don't address the fact that you grieved it, I hear what you're saying. You have to address it because it will come out in other ways.
Mhm.
Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, things are just so abrupt in life.
Yes.
We don't,
Yes.
there is no, like, hey, this is getting ready to happen. It just happens.
Right.
And it's disbelief, it's shock, it's the state, all the stages of grief that you go
Right.
through. And so it requires us to just be in the moment with it,
Hmm.
just to be
Hmm.
in the moment. And sometimes, I know you mentioned crying for days. Sometimes it is crying for days.
True.
Sometimes it's crying for weeks. Sometimes it's
Yes.
crying for months.
Hmm.
Um, and just being able to allow yourself the freedom to just grieve. And I think, society puts a lot of pressure on us that we just have to be okay. And after a loss, sometimes we're just not okay.
Hmm.
We're not okay. There is a separation anxiety. I remember when I was working for a place for over 5 years, and once there was recession happened and lost all the grants, everything happened, and they shut down a big portion of the departments. And I remember, when I got the job, I was in charge of everything there and I took ownership of that. And
Right.
then when it was time to leave, I was happy to leave,
Right.
because I was moving on to the next phase in my life. But I remember walking through the office and having to detach myself now
Mm.
and just say, okay, now it's time. Now I'm relinquished from the assignment. Now
Right.
it's time to move on to the next thing.
Right.
And just understanding that life comes in seasons.
That's right.
Um,
That's
and
right.
and that's how I have to explain it to my daughter, that we have to let go of the old to bring forth the new. And
Right.
that is the most painful thing in death, in loss, in life, just being able to let go. There's power in letting go,
Right.
but it doesn't happen overnight. Our heart
Right.
needs to make space for that.
Hmm.
We really have to make space and really grieve, and then so we can let go. But that's a process.
Right. Right.
And I know you mentioned the journaling, so I wanted to
Please.
follow back up on that. Um, Journaling is a powerful tool because it really gives your feelings a home. It gets it up out of your heart, it gets it up out of your head, and it allows it to find a home on a page. It helps you to make sense of things when you don't even know what you're thinking, you don't even know what you're feeling, you don't even know what to say.
Hmm.
And so I teach my daughters, get your feelings out.
Right.
Whether you're writing to for yourself, you're writing to God, you're writing to
Right.
whatever, but you find answers sometimes. You stumble upon answers. It could be a very divine moment, a very
Yes.
supernatural,
Absolutely.
yeah, supernatural moment where you unearth and kind of process all the things that you're feeling. So I'm intentional about, I didn't always do it every night. I didn't always journal every night, but then I started to, because that's some of my resiliency tools that I need for me.
Right.
I need to get things out off of my chest, and I
Yes.
need to talk. And that's my talking on a page. So
Mm. No, thank you for that. No, I love that. Like I said, I recently started doing it again. And what I love about it is there's no judgment because you, as you said, we have a right to our feelings. We have a right to how we feel. We have a right to being angry. We have a right to being confused. Like, I don't understand why this happened. You have a right to, to just say, how do I want my life to be moving forward? Journaling allows that. And again, if you're a person of faith, for me, it's like I'm writing to the Lord, and I'm able to say, this is how I'm feeling, and it's freeing. And we know we can go to him in prayer with all of our heart, so it allows me to kind of like put prayer on a page.
mhm,
So I definitely enjoy that.
mhm.
We're almost at the end. I do want to ask, do you think that there's a time limit or a shelf life on grief? Like, if you remember when we were at the seminar back in November, there was someone who had talked about a traumatic issue she was dealing with a family member for years. Um, is there ever is can you hold on to something too long? Is there a time limit to your grief? It's at some point, like, is it?
So for grief and loss, the one thing I've learned about grief is as it regards to death, there is no time limit.
Right.
Grief is the greatest expression of love.
That's right.
And you grieve because you love.
That's right.
So a lot of people ask, how long will I grieve? Well, how long are they going to be gone?
Right.
And how long are you going to be alive?
That's right.
You'll grieve until the day you die. Um,
That's right.
and so it's what you do with it. You
Hmm.
allow it, you give it space, and
Hmm.
you can honor your loved one through your grief. So
Right.
you can find meaning in it. So in regards to death and loss, there is no timeline. Now, as far as trauma is concerned, things take time.
Right.
You have to work through it though. It's not going to go anywhere unless you work through it. So whether that's therapy, whether that's coaching, for deeper psychological issues, again, I am a big advocate of therapy. And for those who need guidance, support, assistance with navigating where they are now and moving forward, that's great for a grief coach, because it helps keep you accountable to moving forward. But some people, they do both. I did both. Because again, it's about it's small steps moving forward. How can we move forward? And it's not just regarding grief, it's just about, okay, where would I like to see it? Where would I like to find meaning? Like, who am I becoming in this process with my grief? And you find how to hold both, that you can live fully and grieve fully at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And remember them with more love than pain.
Wow. I love that. I definitely love that. Excellent. Excellent. For someone who is listening to you, and again, they're thinking about maybe possibly becoming a grief coach, what are some of the steps that they need to take? Also, how can they contact you if they want you to be their grief coach? Can you talk a little bit about that? And then, you can also talk about how you got to this point and if you had to start and stop on the journey to begin to launch UnStuck Worldwide. Why don't you talk about that as well?
Okay. So I was certified through International Coaches Federation, Grief to Gratitude program. So I love that program. I love Miss Dora, who is the founder of that program. Um, it gave me everything I needed to get started. After that, I still had that hunger to go further. So I hooked up with David Kessler and
Hmm.
became a part of his team and really, really delved deeper into the education, which is also, and in becoming a coach, becoming an educator, grief movement guide, all the many hats that I wear, it was for me first.
Hmm.
It was for
Hmm.
me first because I needed to know what to do with my pain.
Right.
And that's what therapy couldn't quite do for me. Um,
Got it.
it gave me different types of tools to be able to use for myself, and then being able to go on my own healing journey. Now I'm equipped to help others go on theirs. Um,
Nice.
so David Kessler, he has a truly broad program, where you educated, you do labs, you do, I mean, soup to nuts. You can think of it, he does it, and then you get practical on hands-on experience.
Hmm.
So that's a great program. So grief.com is his program. Then
Yes.
the coaching program is Grief to Gratitude. And I'm sorry, what was the last question you asked? Oh, my business. Oh,
Yes. How do people find you?
okay. So I'm at unstuckworldwide.com. Um,
Mhm.
social media platforms to tag is unstuck_worldwide. And um, yeah. And so the business part of it, um, I do about a lot of volunteering, and my husband and I, we've ministered in the jails, wherever we go. That's what we do. I wanted to broaden what I was doing, and it branched out to public speaking and doing interviews and doing a lot of other things. I felt the call in my career, because again, on the side, I was already doing a lot of volunteering, and I still do a lot of volunteering as in regards to grief. But in my career, I came from being in management and running offices, but then in my career, I felt that it was time to be able to serve people in grief in a different level. And so, um, starting any business is hard.
Yes.
It's because
Oh, yes.
it's easy just to go and work for someone. Some people say
Right.
no, because I mean, there has their positives and negatives, but
Yes.
with starting your own business, you are 100% responsible for everything.
Yes.
So that's a difficult thing. You have to, and unless you have a great mentor and you're surrounded by support, you really have to figure that thing out. And it requires a lot of you. That imposter syndrome is real.
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
can I do
Speaks
this?
loudly.
Yeah, your inner critic is real.
Yes.
So plenty of times I'm like, should I do this? Should I just go back? And I'm like, no, my calling is calling.
Hmm.
I have to answer it. And
That's
so,
right.
yeah. And so this is my purpose. This is my path. And so I have to answer that. So it doesn't matter if I like it, don't like it. Just like with any business, any endeavor you're doing, if you're working, have a manager and you're fulfilling goals for someone else, the greatest thing for me is to be able to do this as a career and fulfill my purpose at the same time. And you mentioned Miss Brown. Um,
Yes.
yeah, she was my mentor, spiritual mother, and my former supervisor. She and I
Right.
work hand in hand together, and it's about purpose at the end of the day. Finding and for me, finding purpose in pain. So
Right.
that's why I started Unstuck Worldwide, to be able to help the brokenhearted heal and recover, and move from grief, loss, and pain to find meaning, joy, and purpose. Because that's the path that God has chosen for me. So I want to breathe that into someone else.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. This has been a wealth of information, and I feel like anyone who's listening or watching, they themselves will become unstuck, if you will. And Sean, are there any final words you want to give to the audience? If you want to say a word, if you want to pray, whatever you feel comfortable with, I just wanted you to be able to leave the audience. And before you do, I want people to go to unstuckworldwide.com to find her. And I don't know if you're on social media as well, you can add that as well. But just any parting words that you might have.
Honor your feelings, that it's okay to feel, that your feelings are important, and to just allow yourself to be, whatever that thing is, whatever you're harboring, whatever you're feeling, to be intentional about your own healing, because it unlocks your purpose. There's we stuff and we just move about the cabin, and we're on social media showing our best life, and it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be hurting. It's okay. And it's okay to be vulnerable. Um, but you have to find your tribe and your safe space to do it. But I would encourage anybody, don't shove, because it will not serve you well. You can't heal what you don't feel, and
Hmm.
your body will tell on you. So
Right.
so don't wait until that happens. Really, we all have boldness and courage to be able to confront anything, and that there is power. There's power in your pain,
Excellent.
and it needs to speak. So
Yes. All right. Ke'Shawn Hill-Adamson, thank you again for joining us. And
thank
for those
you.
of you who have listened, who have tuned in, who are watching, I thank you so much for being a part of this journey of starts and stops. I pray that you continue with it, whatever it is that you are going after, that you go after your calling and your purpose. So thank you for joining. And until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.